Florida's growth engine didn't stop when borrowing costs climbed, it shifted gears. From a $17,959 waterfront estate in Naples to a 1,200-home blueprint in Lakewood Ranch, the numbers reveal where this market is really headed. Start with the hinge that moved the whole door. The Federal Reserve began raising interest rates in 2002. Deals slowed. Underwriting got stricter. But in Miami and across South Florida, developers didn't retreat. They recalibrated. One builder broke ground near Florida International University while rates were still rising after already completing 2 other buildings in the same market. To make the math work, they leaned on private activity bonds, financing that lowers borrowing costs with tax advantages because conventional loans were often too tight. That's how projects crossed the gap between plan and ground, even as the cycle turned. Zoom out and the state's appetite for space is unmistakable. Tampa's retail market ranks second in the nation, trailing only Charlotte in a field of 43 large U.S. markets with at least 100 million square feet of inventory. That ranking weighed percent leased, availability, market rent growth, changes in sales volume, and total returns measured by a market price index. The conclusion is clear. Consumer-facing properties in Tampa are absorbing, pricing power is present, and liquidity, at least in retail, has a real pulse. Policy is reshaping the canvas. In 2023, the Live Local Act removed local restrictions and approvals for developers who build affordable housing on sites already zoned industrial or commercial. Hillsborough County opposed the bill from the moment it was signed and has now escalated. The county's Board of County Commissioners unanimously directed its attorney to challenge the court's decision and test the constitutionality of the Live Local Act and any other Florida statute violations it may impose. That unanimous vote sets up a courtroom test of how far state preemption extends into county land use, with housing supply hanging in the balance. One more lever sits offshore. A push is underway to lock in a drilling moratorium through 2032. The proposal, called the American Shores Protection Act, would codify a 2020 executive order and extend an existing moratorium from 2022 out to 2032. It had a request for unanimous consent on the Senate floor, with backing that included Rick Scott. The intent is to keep rigs out of sight along the coast for another decade. For real estate on the Gulf and the Atlantic, that policy line defines what stays visible over the horizon, and what does not. Now, walk a Naples street and watch how capital is still hunting for the extraordinary. On Mooring Line Drive, a contemporary waterfront estate built in December 2020 is asking $17,959,000. It sits 0.4 miles from the beach with direct, bridge-free Gulf access through Doctor's Pass. Inside, there are 6,900 square feet of living space, 6 bedrooms, 6 full baths, and 3 half baths. A separate guest villa stands apart. There are 3 laundry rooms, a 3-car garage, 14-foot ceilings run throughout. Floor-to-ceiling sliders stretch 12 feet high, opening to a pool and spa, a summer kitchen, a sun deck with a built-in fire pit, and a proper fireplace. This is not just finish work, it's a survival plan. Concrete block construction anchors the shell. Hurricane impact windows and doors line the envelope. Electric motorized entry gates and electric hurricane shutters stand ready for when the wind turns. For boaters, there are dual lifts, one size for a 30-foot boat with a 16 pound capacity, the other for dual jet skis. A private elevator rides the floors. A buried gas propane tank keeps the power steady. When Naples builds at 8 figures, it designs for both calm seas and storm wakes. The brokerage behind that listing traces roots back to 1958. From there to now, it has grown into 19 offices across Collier and Lee counties with approximately 900 agents and staff. The scale tells its own story. A regional network large enough to market estates at $17,959,000 and small enough to anchor them to specific canals, club memberships, and a private beach park that locals know by name. Head north within Naples and the rhythm shifts from one-off estate to curated enclave. Palisades Naples covers 12 acres and keeps a tight inventory. Only 12 home sites remain. The model christened Palm Springs is complete, designed and fully furnished, and it wears its numbers openly. Inside there are 5,335 square feet of living space and 7,771 total square feet under roof. The plan is 2 stories with 5 bedrooms, a study, and a clubroom. Bathrooms tally to 5 full and 3 half. An oversized 3-car garage leaves room for storage. Upstairs, 3 VIP guest suites share a covered lanai. Outside, a custom pool with a water feature wall and spa sits behind electric roll-down screens, next to an outdoor kitchen, a stone fireplace, a turf lounge, and a dedicated pool bath. The finishes tell you where Naples is going. Medium stained oak floors, black framed windows, natural stone backsplashes, Sub-Zero and Wolf appliances set into stacked cabinetry, a waterfall island in the kitchen, and in the owner's bath, honed marble floors, a soaking tub, and a shower with 4 shower heads. The intent is explicit, coastal design that reads modern, not merely beachy, and a home that works on day one without waiting for long-delayed furniture shipments. Beyond the walls, the amenity race is getting its own address and date. Paraiso Beach Club is planned for approximately 1.35 acres on Gulf Shore Drive, with an opening goal in 2027. Membership is open. The program includes 3 restaurants, 1 fine dining, 1 open-air bar and grill, plus another with covered balconies, alongside resort-style pools, private cabanas, and a wellness spa. The structure will be low profile to preserve viewing corridors for neighbors and pedestrians. There will be no parking permitted on site except for special needs access. Instead, dedicated shuttles will run for members and staff. That choice forces a specific flow of people to and from the shore. It's a land planning decision with a number attached. 0 parking on the parcel by design. Across the state's center, the storyline is visibility and voice. In Winter Garden, a Central Florida real estate advisor has been selected to host a nationally syndicated television segment focused on the city's lifestyle and market. Filming is scheduled for December 2030. The episode will spotlight Winter Garden's farmers market, local small businesses, and a listing that reflects the area's growth. It's a small moment with a precise date, but it reflects a wider pattern, communities selling their story alongside their square footage. The healthcare grid is scaling up where suburban growth is swift. In Orange Park, a new freestanding emergency room arrived with a $26,000 price tag. New facilities of that size slot into neighborhoods as both an amenity and a jobs engine, and in Florida, they often arrive as part of larger networks. The math feels abstract until you think about drive times and decision windows. In an emergency, shaving minutes matters. That's why Lee County's public safety expansion is notable in its own quiet way. The county is placing additional automated external defibrillators in 5 park and recreation locations, taking the total to 258 AEDs across sites from libraries to administrative offices. Of those, 73 units are dedicated to parks and recreation facilities. County Emergency Medical Services respond to 20 to 30 cardiac-related calls at park locations each year. When the public can start a rescue in those first moments, survival odds rise. One more example of infrastructure building to pace the population curve. The population curve shows up in corporate ledgers, too. Among South Florida's fastest-growing companies, with at least $25,000 in revenue, the top 5 spots in both 22.4 and 22.5 are in the same wheelhouse: healthcare, construction, and financial services. The consistency across 2 years says something steady about demand and investment. Healthcare follows people. Construction follows demand. Finance follows opportunity. For real estate, that means the local economy's job engine is still synced to the sectors that buy land, lease space, and need workers who, in turn, need housing they can afford. Affordability is where the legal and the local collide. The Live Local Act tries to accelerate supply by letting developers convert industrial and commercial sites into affordable housing without running a gauntlet of local approvals. Hillsborough County's blanket objection since 2023 has now been formalized into a legal challenge, unanimously approved by the Board of County Commissioners. If a court narrows the statute, more projects could hit friction at the county line. If the law stands as written, more projects could fast-track from site-to-site plan. Either way, the outcome will ripple into deals and build-outs across the Tampa metro, which is the same region now posting a number 2 ranking in U.S. retail. At the neighborhood level, One builder has already placed a bet on scale in the Sarasota-Manatee corridor. A land acquisition closed in Lakewood Ranch with plans to bring a 1,200-home community wrapped in resort-style amenities. 1,200 is not a niche. It's a town-size wager on employment nodes, school districts, and arterial roads that can carry more cars. It also hints at a thesis. Even with higher rates since 2022, buyers are out there if the product, price, and lifestyle are aligned. Miami's thesis is densification, and that's not just a skyline cliche. In Brickell, offices that were once seasonal are now year-round hives. One developer who came up on Wall Street and through the 2008 crisis now targets socially oriented, high-design housing for the middle class and for students. His recent groundbreak near Florida International University fits that formula, close to campus, financed with tools like private activity bonds, and designed to be attainable without looking bare bones. It's a niche, but not a small one, and it fits the way Miami is layering spectacular luxury projects with housing that supports a permanent community. There's a lesson baked into that approach. Projects take years. When you break ground, the cycle you finish in will not be the one you started in. That's why cultivating long-term partners and flexible financing matters, and why a cautious mindset, the kind that expects half of all things to go wrong, can be an asset. Discipline avoids the trap of leaning too hard into any single narrative, whether wildly bullish or grimly bearish. Opportunity often shows up as an anomaly, and staying in the market every day is how you find it. Even universities feel like players in the growth game. The University of Florida's Board of Trustees named a 15-member Presidential Search Advisory Committee on December 16 to guide the search for the institution's 14th president. Leadership changes at that scale can tilt priorities and budgets, which shape research, construction, and the housing needs of students and staff. That is not a forecast, it's a reminder that institutions move markets, and that dates and numbers often reveal the next pivot. Dates also anchor litigation that can echo into property values. The first Florida trial over claims tied to the weedkiller roundup is set for March, brought by a man in the Fort Lauderdale area who links long-term exposure to a cancer diagnosis. The courtroom is not a housing market, but the outcomes of cases like this can affect insurance conversations, lender risk appetites, and even how properties are marketed and disclosed, particularly when cases climb into statewide awareness. Back to the coast, where policy choices draw the outline of the view. The push to extend the drilling moratorium through 2032 would codify a 2020 executive order and keep the current protections that started in 2022 in place for 10 more years. If that becomes law, it lends another layer of certainty to waterfront investment from Naples up through the Panhandle and across to the Atlantic side. If it stalls, the policy window narrows, and decisions around coastal development will carry a more conditional quality. On the ground in Naples, the tangible signals are already in place. The moorings estate at 441 Mooring Line Drive is shaped for privacy and redundancy. Electric screens flow down over outdoor spaces. A rooftop observation deck offers Gulf and bay views. The chef's kitchen holds dual wood islands with waterfall concrete overlays, thermidor appliances, custom cabinetry, and a butler's pantry. The main-level primary suite folds in a wet bar, custom wood ceilings, walk-in closets, and a spa-inspired bath with dual vanities, dual water closets, a generous shower with dual benches, and a soaking tub. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms flank a sundeck, while the separate guest villa keeps visitors on their own rhythm. For buyers who equate resilience with value, those are specs that meet the moment. And the Palm Springs model in North Naples presses the same buttons, just with a different melody. A grand foyer opens into a great room with ceiling beams and a custom wet bar, complete with an ice maker and an under-counter wine refrigerator. The gourmet kitchen's custom hood crowns a lineup of paneled appliances. The owner's suite sends sliding doors to the lanai, making mornings feel like a resort. Above, a club room with a built-in bar caters to evenings. It's an architecture of ease, laid out in exact counts. 5 bedrooms, 5 full baths, 3 half baths, a study, a club room, and those 7,771 total square feet of breathing space. Make no mistake, the premium market and the attainable market are not in conflict. They're in dialogue. In Miami, luxury projects are described as spectacular, and they have their audience. At the same time, middle-class housing is being designed with high-touch finishes and located where people work and study. Both tracks are needed if the city's densification is to be more than a skyline shot. You can see the blend in the numbers. Luxury asks for $17,959,000 and promises a 30-foot boat lift at £16,000. Workforce housing measures success by breaking ground near a campus and securing lower-cost financing through private activity bonds. The same metro requires both. Retail rounds out the triangle. With Tampa ranking second in a 43 market comparison, landlords and lenders can point to real absorption and rent growth as tailwinds. The methodology, percent of inventory leased, availability rate, rent growth, change in sales volume, and total returns, maps the same terrain investors consider when deciding to buy, build, or wait. Those metrics don't just crown a winner, they shape who writes checks in the zip codes around it. County-level governance will decide how quickly those checks turn into keys. Hillsborough County's unanimous directive to challenge the live local act testing its constitutionality puts a specific procedural clock into motion. While that clock runs, developers aiming to convert a commercial or industrial site into affordable housing will gauge risk in two columns: the statute's promise of streamlined approvals and the county's determination to keep local processes in play. Wherever the threshold becomes case law, other counties will read the outcome closely. Some attention is rightly directed to systems that are neither homes nor buildings, but make neighborhoods livable. AEDs in parks are one such system, and Lee County's decision to seed an additional 5 park and recreation locations, bringing the network to 258 units with 73 dedicated to parks and recreation, is a small investment with outsized impact. Number those impacts by incident: 20 to 30 cardiac-related calls at park locations each year. Demand for homes does not grow in a vacuum. It grows in places where people feel safe. A $26,000 emergency room in Orange Park speaks that same language at a larger scale. Even smaller details mark the tilt. A new restaurant at 905 Central Avenue in St. WAC, Petersburg's Edge District, plans to build around fresh pasta made daily, carbonara, cacio e pepe, pesto di pistachi. That list may sound like dinner, not investment, but in strong retail markets, it is both. The dishes add up to lease terms and payrolls. They capture foot traffic that often migrates into condos and townhouses nearby. The business ecosystem that underwrites all of this continues to evolve in familiar directions. In 2024 and 2025, the top 5 fastest-growing companies in South Florida, with revenues above $25,000 clustered in healthcare, construction, and financial services. Those categories connect to the built environment with short, sturdy lines. Healthcare opens hubs. Construction builds everything from hospitals to homes. Finance organizes the capital stack. Their growth validates why a $17,959,000 listing finds a market in Naples, and why a 1,200 home plan finds financing in Lakewood Ranch. On the development side, deal craft matters more when rates bite. Private activity bonds are one example in the toolkit, tax-advantaged instruments that lower borrowing costs to make workforce housing pencil. If a tower or a student-oriented building takes years to build, the rate regime at completion may be lighter than at kickoff. That is not a prediction, it's a reason why builders hedge their financing and choose partners who can ride a longer arc without panicking at midpoint. This is where a brief vignette grounds the abstract. A Miami developer who learned the business by negotiating debt during the 2008 crisis now brings that scar tissue into 2025. He admits to being the most pessimistic developer in the room, expecting plenty to go wrong, and yet he keeps advancing projects near Florida International University, with exactly the kind of financing that fits the current cycle. The paradox is useful: cautious eyes, continuing motion. It's not optimism, it's discipline. Looking ahead, the base case is a Florida that continues to build across multiple price points under a policy climate that is actively being defined. Tampa's retail strength suggests rents and occupancy will stay firm enough to justify new build-outs in select corridors. Naples will keep attracting capital to 8-figure waterfront and curated enclave product, from a 6,900 square foot moorings estate to a 5,335 square foot model designed to live like a resort. Miami will press densification by pairing spectacular luxury with attainable housing near job and education nodes, backed by financing like private activity bonds when conventional loans remain tight. Two watch items can move this baseline. First, the legal outcome of Hillsborough County's challenge to the Live Local Act. If a court affirms the act's removal of local restrictions and approvals for affordable housing on industrial and commercial land, expect an uptick in applications targeting those parcels. If the court narrows it, plan on longer timelines and more local negotiation in the Tampa metro. Second, the legislative fate of the American Shores Protection Act. If codified, the moratorium would extend protections from 2022 through 2032, providing a decade-long horizon that signals stability for coastal development. If not, watch for added caution in how shoreline projects are pitched and priced. The numbers we've walked through are not mere decoration. They're coordinates. A $17,959,000 ask, 6,900 square feet, 30 feet of boat with 16,000 pounds of lift, 12 acres in an enclave with 12 home sites, 5,335 and 7,771 square feet on a model that sets a standard, 1.35 acres of beach club with 3 restaurants and 0 on-site parking by design, a 1,200 home community staked in a master-planned juggernaut, a second-place retail ranking out of 43 markets with at least 100 million square feet, a $26,000 emergency room, 258 AEDs with 73 placed in parks, answering 20 to 30 calls a year, a 15-member search committee engaged on December 16th to find a 14th university president, and a March trial date that will be watched for what it implies about risk. Each figure tells you what's being built, where effort is directed, and how the tide is turning. Florida is not one market, it's a spectrum. On one end, the moorings count ceiling heights in feet and boats in pounds. On the other, a builder near a university measures patience in years and interest savings in basis points through a bond instrument. Both ends are real. Both ends require policy clarity and disciplined capital. The takeaway is not complicated. Since 2022, when rates rose, the players who adjusted their models, who found tax-advantaged financing, who matched product to place, who read the local policy climate, kept moving. The scoreboard is there to see. Tampa's number 2 retail ranking, a 1,200 home bet in Lakewood Ranch, a $17,959,000 golf access estate, a 5,335 square foot model that blurs the line between home and resort, and a beach club that will bring 3 restaurants to 1.35 acres by 2027 without a single parking stall on site. Signals suggest the next chapter will read much the same, but with sharper edges. Keep your eye on the court in Hillsborough County and on a bipartisan vote that could fix the coastal horizon through 2030 to watch for groundbreakings near campuses and job nodes that lean on private activity bonds to tip the calculus. And in the interim, read the small numbers as carefully as the big ones. Sometimes the difference between an ordinary neighborhood and an exceptional one is 5 AEDs added to a network that now totals $258 emergency room, filling a gap between subdivisions. In Florida, the future comes spelled out in price tags, square footage, acreages, dates, and simple counts. Track them closely, and you'll see what happens next before it hits the skyline. If you found these Florida real estate numbers useful, stay with us for the next deep dive.